My car died on Christmas Eve. Not metaphorically, not dramatically, just died. One minute I was driving through rural Wyoming trying to get to my brother's place in Denver, the next minute the engine was making a sound like a dying animal and smoke was pouring from under the hood. I pulled over on the side of the highway, if you could even call it a highway. It was more like a two-lane road cutting through endless, snow-covered nothing, and stared at the smoke rising into the gray December sky. Perfect, I said to nobody, absolutely perfect. My name is Jamie Sullivan. I'm 28 years old. I work as a graphic designer in San Francisco. I'm gay, single, and currently stranded in the middle of Wyoming on Christmas Eve because my 10-year-old Honda finally gave up on life. I tried calling AAA, no signal. I tried calling my brother, no signal. I tried calling anyone, no signal. I got out of the car and looked around. Snow, mountains, pine trees, more snow, not a building in sight, not another car on the road, just me and my dead Honda and the very real possibility that I was going to freeze to death on Christmas Eve. I'd left San Francisco 3 days ago after my boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, had told me he'd been sleeping with someone else for 6 months, on Christmas, because apparently the universe had decided this was going to be the worst holiday season of my entire life. "Merry Christmas to me," I muttered, pulling my jacket tighter against the cold. I started walking. I had no idea where I was going, but staying with the car seemed stupid when the temperature was dropping and the sun would be setting in a couple hours. So I walked down the highway hoping I'd find a gas station or a house or literally anything with people. I walked for maybe 20 minutes before I saw it, a ranch house set back from the road, smoke coming from the chimney, lights in the windows. It looked like something out of a Christmas card. I walked up the long driveway, my feet crunching in the snow, and knocked on the door. Nobody answered. I knocked again, harder this time. The door opened. The man standing there was not what I expected. He was maybe mid-30s, tall, probably 6'2", with broad shoulders and the kind of build that came from actual physical work. He had light brown hair, blue-gray eyes, and a face that was handsome in a rugged, weathered way. He was wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, and he was looking at me like I'd just appeared out of thin air. "Help you," he said. His voice was deep with a slight Western drawl. "My car broke down about a mile back. I don't have cell service and I'm sorry to bother you on Christmas Eve, but I didn't know where else to go." He looked at me for a long moment, then he said, "Come in, you're freezing." His name was Wyatt Parker, and he lived alone on a cattle ranch that had been in his family for 3 generations. He made me coffee while I stood in his kitchen trying to warm up. The house was exactly what you'd expect from a bachelor rancher: practical furniture, minimal decoration, a wood stove that was putting out impressive heat. "So your car just died," Wyatt said, handing me a mug of coffee. "Yeah, smoke everywhere. I think it's the engine or the transmission or something expensive and catastrophic. There's a mechanic in town, but he won't be open until the day after Christmas. Probably won't be able to get parts until next week. So I'm stuck." "Looks like it." He leaned against the counter. "Where were you headed?" "Denver, my brother's place. He's having Christmas dinner with his family." "You got a way to contact him? Let him know you're okay." "Not without cell service." "I've got a landline, you can call from here." I called my brother from Wyatt's kitchen phone and explained the situation. My brother offered to come get me, but I told him not to. It was a 6-hour drive one way and the roads were getting bad. "I'll figure something out," I said. "I'll call you tomorrow." After I hung up, Wyatt said, "You can stay here tonight until we can figure out your car situation." I couldn't. "You don't have a choice. It's Christmas Eve, everything's closed, and it's going to be below zero tonight. You're not sleeping in your car." "I don't want to impose, especially on Christmas." "It's not an imposition. I've got a spare room. You can stay there." He paused. "Unless you've got somewhere else to be." I didn't, so I said yes. Wyatt made dinner: steak and potatoes and green beans, simple but good. We ate at his kitchen table and he asked me about San Francisco and I asked him about ranching, and we talked about safe, surface-level things. But I kept noticing details: the way he moved, economical, precise, like someone who didn't waste energy; the way his hands looked calloused and scarred from work; the way he'd glance at me sometimes when he thought I wasn't looking. After dinner, he showed me the spare room, small but clean, with a bed and a dresser and a window that looked out over snow-covered pasture. "Bathroom's down the hall," Wyatt said. "There's extra towels in the closet. If you need anything, let me know." "Thank you, really, I know this is weird, a stranger showing up on Christmas Eve. It's fine, happens more than you'd think. People get lost out here, roads are confusing if you don't know them." He paused in the doorway. "Get some rest, we'll figure out your car tomorrow." After he left, I sat on the bed and tried to process the day. 12 hours ago, I'd been in San Francisco. Now I was in rural Wyoming in a stranger's house. It felt surreal. I texted my brother from the landline, sent him Wyatt's address and phone number just in case. Then I lay down and stared at the ceiling and thought about how my ex had ruined Christmas and how I was supposed to spend it with family and instead I was here. I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I knew it was dark outside and I could hear movement in the house. I got up and found Wyatt in the living room, putting logs on the fire. "Sorry," I said, "did I wake you?" "No, I don't sleep much, old habit," he gestured to the couch. "Sit if you want." I sat. The fire was warm and the room was dark except for the flames, and it felt oddly intimate. "Can I ask you something?" Wyatt said. "Sure." "Why were you driving to Denver on Christmas Eve? Most people fly." "I don't like flying and I needed time to think." The drive was supposed to be therapeutic. "Was it?" "Not particularly." I paused. "My ex-boyfriend, told me he'd been cheating on me on Christmas, so I left, and I figured I'd spend the holiday with my brother instead of sitting alone in my apartment feeling sorry for myself." "That's rough, I'm sorry." "Thanks," I looked at him. "What about you? Why are you spending Christmas alone?" "I'm always alone on Christmas. My parents passed a few years ago. My sister lives in Texas with her family. I usually just work through the holidays. Animals don't care if it's Christmas." "That sounds lonely." "It is, but it's easier than." He stopped. "Never mind." "Easier than what?" He was quiet for a long time, then he said, "Easier than explaining to people why I don't have a wife or a girlfriend, why I'm 36 and single and probably always will be." My heart did something irregular. "Why is that?" He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw it, the same careful guardedness I'd learned to recognize in other closeted people. "Because I'm gay," Wyatt said quietly. "And in a town of 300 people where everyone knows everyone and my family's been here for 3 generations, that's not something I can be open about." We talked until 3 in the morning. Wyatt told me about growing up on the ranch, about knowing he was different from a young age but not having words for it, about going to college in Laramie and finally understanding what he was, then coming back to the ranch and burying it deep because there was no space for it here. "I had a boyfriend in college," Wyatt said. "For 2 years, he wanted me to stay in Laramie, move to a city, build a life where we could be open, but I couldn't leave the ranch. It's been in my family for 3 generations. My dad left it to me. I couldn't just abandon it." "So you chose the ranch over him?" "I chose obligation over happiness, which sounds noble but mostly it's just sad." He looked at the fire. "He's married now to a man. They live in Seattle. I see his Facebook posts sometimes. He looks happy." "Do you regret it?" "Every day." I told him about my ex, about the cheating, about how I'd suspected for months but hadn't wanted to admit it, about the relief I'd felt when it finally ended even though it hurt. "Why relief?" Wyatt asked. "Because I didn't love him anymore. Maybe I never really did. I think I was just going through the motions, doing what I was supposed to do, date someone, move in together, talk about marriage, but none of it felt real." "What would feel real?" "I don't know, something honest, something where I don't have to perform or pretend, something that feels like coming home instead of like work." Wyatt looked at me and something passed between us. Recognition, understanding, the particular kind of loneliness that comes from being queer in spaces that aren't made for you. "You should sleep," Wyatt said finally. "It's late." "Yeah, you're right." But neither of us moved. "Jamie," Wyatt said, Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Do you believe in signs, like things happening for a reason?" "I don't know why." "Because your car broke down in front of my ranch on Christmas Eve. Out of everywhere in Wyoming you could have broken down, and you knocked on my door and he stopped. I haven't told anyone I'm gay in 10 years, but I told you, a stranger. Why did I do that? Maybe because I'm safe, because I'll leave in a few days and you'll never see me again. Maybe he looked at me, or maybe because you were supposed to be here for some reason. My chest felt tight. Wyatt. I know it's crazy you don't even know me, but I feel like, he stopped again. Never mind, forget I said anything. He stood up to leave and I said, wait. He turned. I feel it too, I said. Whatever this is, I feel it. We stood there in his living room at 3 a.m. on Christmas morning and looked at each other, and I thought about fate and signs and the particular kind of magic that happens when two lonely people find each other in unexpected places. Stay another day, Wyatt said. After we get your car sorted, just spend Christmas with me. Okay, I said, I'll stay. I woke up Christmas morning to the smell of coffee and bacon. I found Wyatt in the kitchen making breakfast: eggs, bacon, toast, hash browns. He was wearing the same flannel shirt from yesterday and his hair was still damp from the shower. Merry Christmas, he said when he saw me. Merry Christmas, you didn't have to make breakfast. I was already cooking for myself, not much more work to cook for two. He handed me a plate. Sit, eat. We ate breakfast together and it felt domestic in a way that should have been strange but wasn't. Comfortable, natural. So what's the plan, I asked, for my car? I'll drive you into town after breakfast. We can talk to Joe, he's the mechanic. He might be able to look at it today even though it's Christmas. He owes me a favor. And if he can't fix it today, then you stay another night, maybe two, however long it takes. The way he said it made it sound less like an inconvenience and more like an invitation. After breakfast, Wyatt had to feed the cattle and check on the horses. He asked if I wanted to come with him. I've never been on a working ranch before, I said. First time for everything. I bundled up in spare winter gear Wyatt lent me, a coat that was too big, boots that were a size too large, gloves that smelled like leather and work. We walked out into the cold and I followed him around while he did his morning chores. Watching Wyatt work was something. He moved with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what he was doing, who'd been doing it his whole life. He talked to the animals gently, checked fences methodically, carried hay bales like they weighed nothing. You're good at this, I said. I should be, been doing it since I was 6. He threw another hay bale into the feeding area. You want to try? Try what? Feeding the cattle, it's not hard. He showed me how to break apart the hay bales and spread them out for the cows. My hands were clumsy in the big gloves and I definitely wasn't doing it as efficiently as Wyatt, but he was patient. You're doing fine, he said when I apologized for being slow. Nobody's born knowing how to do this stuff, you learn. After chores, we drove into town in Wyatt's truck. The town was exactly what you'd picture: one main street, a few shops, a diner, a church, everything closed for Christmas except the gas station. Joe's auto shop was technically closed, but Wyatt called him and he agreed to meet us there. Joe was maybe 60, weathered and gruff, but he shook my hand warmly when Wyatt introduced us. Broke down on Christmas Eve, Joe said, shaking his head. That's rough, son, let's see what we can do. He drove out to my car with us, popped the hood, poked around for 15 minutes, then delivered the bad news. It's your engine, cracked block, you're looking at a full replacement. How much? I asked, already dreading the answer. Parts and labor? Probably 4,000–5,000, and I can't get the parts until after New Year's. Earliest I could have it done is next week sometime. I felt sick. I didn't have $5,000 just sitting around, and I couldn't stay in Wyoming for a week. Can you tow it somewhere? Wyatt asked Joe. Somewhere he can pick it up later. Sure, I can tow it to my shop, store it there until you figure out what you want to do. Joe looked at me. Sorry kid, timing's awful. After Joe left, I stood on the side of the road looking at my dead car and trying to figure out what to do. I can't afford to fix it right now, I said. And I can't stay here for a week. I have to get back to San Francisco. I have work. When do you have to be back? January 2nd, I have a meeting with a client. That's a week, we can figure something out. Wyatt, you don't have to. You can stay at my place until you figure out a plan, whether that's fixing the car or selling it or getting a rental or whatever, but you're not stranded, you have options. I can't just stay at your house for a week, you don't even know me. I know you well enough and honestly, he looked at me, I'd like the company if you're willing to stay. I should have said no. Should have called my brother to come get me or rented a car or figured out literally any other solution that didn't involve spending a week with a man I just met who I was already developing feelings for. But I said okay, I'll stay if you're sure. I'm sure. The week between Christmas and New Year's was one of the strangest and best weeks of my life. I fell into Wyatt's routine, up at dawn to feed animals, breakfast together, work. I did freelance design work on my laptop, Wyatt did ranch work, lunch, more work, dinner together, evenings by the fire talking. We talked about everything, our childhoods, our families, our fears, our dreams. The conversation felt endless, like we were trying to fit years of getting to know you into a handful of days. What do you love about San Francisco? Wyatt asked one night. The people, the diversity, the fact that I can hold my boyfriend's hand, ex-boyfriend's hand and nobody cares, the freedom to just be myself without performing straightness. Sounds nice. It is, but it's also lonely sometimes, in a different way, like everyone's so busy performing their best life that nobody's actually connecting. So you traded one kind of loneliness for another. Yeah, I guess I did. What would the ideal life look like, Wyatt asked, if you could have anything? I don't know, somewhere I could be myself, somewhere with community, work I care about, someone to come home to who actually wants to be there. I paused. What about you? Same, I guess, but also staying here on this land, doing this work, it's in my blood, I can't imagine living anywhere else. So you're stuck between the life you want and the place you love. Exactly. We were sitting close on the couch, closer than friends but not quite touching, and I could feel the tension building. The question neither of us was brave enough to ask, what happens when I leave? On New Year's Eve, Wyatt made a nice dinner. Steak, roasted vegetables, a bottle of wine he'd been saving. We ate by candlelight and it felt like a date even though neither of us called it that. After dinner, we went outside to watch the fireworks from town, barely visible from the ranch, but you could see them if you looked hard enough. We were standing on his porch in the cold and Wyatt said, Jamie, I need to tell you something. Okay. I'm falling for you, I know that's crazy, I know we just met, I know you're leaving in 2 days, but I can't not say it, I'm falling for you and I don't know what to do about it. My heart was racing. Wyatt. You don't have to say anything, I just needed you to know before you leave, before this ends, I needed you to know that this week mattered, that you matter. It matters to me too, you matter to me too. But you're still leaving. I have a life in San Francisco, a job, an apartment, friends, I can't just stay. I know I'm not asking you to, he looked at me, can I kiss you once before this ends? I should have said no, should have protected both of us from more hurt, but instead I said yes. He kissed me there on his porch on New Year's Eve and it was gentle and desperate at the same time, like we were trying to fit a whole relationship into one kiss. When we broke apart, we were both breathing hard and I could see in his eyes that he was asking a question, what if you stayed? And I was asking back, what if I could? On January 1st, I started making arrangements to leave. I decided to leave the car with Joe and fly back to San Francisco. I'd deal with the car later, maybe sell it, maybe ship it home, I didn't know, but I had to get back. Wyatt drove me to the small regional airport 2 hours away. We didn't talk much on the drive, the weight of goodbye hung between us. At the airport, I got out of the truck and grabbed my bag. Thank you, I said, for everything, for letting me stay, for all of it. You're welcome. Wyatt's hands were tight on the steering wheel. Jamie. Please don't say it, it'll make this harder. I have to, he looked at me. What if you stayed? What if you didn't go back to San Francisco? What if you stayed here with me? Wyatt, I can't, I have a whole life there. Do you love that life, or are you just going through the motions? I didn't have an answer to that. I'm not asking you to decide right now, Wyatt continued. I'm just asking you to think about it, about what you actually want, about whether San Francisco is really where you want to be or if you're just there because it's easier than figuring out what you actually want. And what do I actually want? I don't know, but I think maybe you don't either. I think you've been going through the motions for a long time, and maybe this week was a wake-up call, a chance to see what life could be like if you made different choices. I got on the plane feeling torn in half. I spent 3 days back in San Francisco feeling completely wrong. My apartment felt too small, my friends felt like strangers, my work felt meaningless. Everything that had been normal a week ago now felt like a costume I was wearing. I kept thinking about Wyoming, about Wyatt, about the way I'd felt on the ranch, useful, present, connected. On my 4th day back, my brother called. "How are you doing?" he asked. "You sounded weird when you called from Wyoming." "I'm fine, just adjusting." "Jamie, what happened out there? You sound different." So I told him about Wyatt, about the week, about the offer to stay. "Do you want to stay?" my brother asked. "I don't know, it's crazy, right? I barely know him, and Wyoming, I'm a city person, I don't know anything about ranching." "That's not what I asked, do you want to stay?" "Yes," I said quietly, "I think I do." "Then what's stopping you?" "Fear, practicality, the fact that it doesn't make sense." "Jamie, you're 28, you're single, you work remotely, you don't have kids or a mortgage or anything tying you to San Francisco. If you want to try something different, now's the time." "But what if it doesn't work out?" "Then you come back, you get a new apartment, you start over, but at least you'll know. You won't spend the rest of your life wondering what if." I thought about that conversation for 2 more days, and then I made a decision. I flew back to Wyoming on January 10th. I'd quit my job, well, transitioned to fully remote freelance. I'd ended my apartment lease. I'd packed what mattered and put the rest in storage. I hadn't told Wyatt I was coming. I wanted to surprise him. Or maybe I was scared that if I told him I was coming back, he'd change his mind. I rented a car at the airport and drove the 2 hours to his ranch. It was late afternoon when I pulled up the driveway. I knocked on the door. Wyatt answered, and his face went through about 5 different emotions in 2 seconds: surprise, confusion, hope, fear, joy. "Jamie, what are you?" "I came back." "I can see that, why?" "Because you were right about San Francisco, about me going through the motions, about me not knowing what I actually want." I took a breath. "And because this week with you was the most real I've felt in years, and I want more of that if you'll have me." "If I'll." "Jamie, are you saying you want to stay here with me?" "Yes, if that offer's still open, if I'm not too late." He pulled me inside and kissed me, and I felt like I was finally, actually home. "We're not perfect. We fight sometimes. About money, about the ranch, about how much time I spend on the computer versus helping with chores, about his tendency to bottle up feelings and my tendency to overthink everything. But we're real, we're honest, we're building something together." I work as a freelance designer from the ranch. Wyatt still runs the cattle operation. We've started attending the LGBTQ plus community group in the nearest city, 2 hours away, but worth it to be around people who get it. Wyatt came out to his sister. She was surprised but supportive. His parents would have struggled with it, but they're gone, and we're building our own family now. We're not legally married yet. Wyoming doesn't make it easy, but we're committed. We're partners. We're home for each other. Last Christmas Eve, we drove out to the spot where my car broke down, and we stood there in the snow. "You know what?" I said. "I'm glad my car died." "Best breakdown ever," Wyatt agreed. "Sometimes the worst days lead to the best ones. Sometimes getting stranded leads to finding home. Sometimes a stranger becomes the person you build your whole life around." Wyatt found me alone on Christmas, and what he did next changed everything. He offered me a place to stay, then he offered me his heart, and I took it, and I gave him mine back. And we're still here, still building, still choosing each other every day.